I love Mortal Kombat. Since the first game hit the arcades in 1992, just mashing buttons while my parents weren't looking, all the way to religiously watching the pools and finals of nearly every major tournament of today, Mortal Kombat just does it for me. I'm not here to tell you everything about the series or break down all the characters. I'm just gonna give you my story. Maybe you'll relate to parts of it, and I invite you to share your own Mortal Kombat story down below. I played both Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter II in their first years in the arcade. I was way too young to know what I was doing, of course. I didn't even pay attention to what attacks I was doing, really. I just spammed hurricane kicks and hadokens, spears and ice balls. I probably played both games equally in the arcades, but it was the violence and darkness of Mortal Kombat that attracted me to it the most. My mom raised me on classic horror movies, so it's not a surprise that little Mayo was fascinated by the fatalities. I had a Sega Genesis, and on the historic Mortal Monday of September 1993, the day home consoles finally saw a port of society's most dangerous arcade game, my parents got me a copy. Yeah, I was definitely too young for something so violent, but if you didn't already know, the console versions were censored. The Super Nintendo changed all the blood to a sweat color, and the goriest of the fatalities were completely changed, like Johnny Cage's decapitation punch becoming just a powerful shadow kick. The censoring of Mortal Kombat on the Super Nintendo was mocked by fans, officially turning Nintendo into the kiddie console. Because while the Sega Genesis also censored the fatalities and blood, it came with a secret blood code that became widely circulated and brought back all the arcade gore we wanted. I wasn't allowed to enter it at my house, sadly, but I still recall one of my earliest childhood memories was my birthday in 1994, when my parents gifted me one day of being allowed to enter the blood code. Oh, you've never seen a kid happier. Now, at this point, we'd already been playing Mortal Kombat 2 in the arcades for months, and believe me, the release of Mortal Kombat 2 was a big deal. Even the cabinet itself was intimidating. The art and color was so bold. Thunderstorm and lightning as the logo emerges. Mortal Kombat 2 was here to show that the first game was no fluke. They had a bigger budget, bigger ambitions, and bigger ideas. And they weren't backing down from violence or controversy. I have a very specific visual memory of MK2, and it's from the water park I used to frequent with my family in the summers. There was an arcade in the center, and in the back corner there was the new MK2 cabinet in the dark with an audience of kids just staring, not even wanting to play. We mostly just watched the bigger kids violently murder each other. The cabinet was one of those big ones with the big screen and a lot of space between the players and the display, very similar to the ones you would see for Marvel vs. Capcom 2. It was the perfect spot for entertainment. I got to play it a bit myself, trying to pull off that tricky Kintaro fatality with Shang Tsung. I remember loving Reptile, I thought his acid moves were so cool, and Kitana became an instant favorite, where she remains to this day. What stands out the most to me about MK2 was how bold and bright the colors were compared to the first game, but that certainly didn't make it a lighter game in tone. The stages were very dark and moody, it was much more violent, and the music was simply incredible. Of course, my friends and I got Mortal Kombat 2 on the consoles when it came out, and this time there was no censoring of the violence, no blood code needed for Genesis, and Nintendo learned their lesson from last time and made sure to keep the blood if they want those sales. Despite playing fighting games like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter and X-Men Children of the Atom for a few years at this point, I was not getting any better as a young fighting game player. I simply wasn't paying attention. My friends and I were having too much fun doing the special moves and jump kicking to care about strategy or combos. We had no concept of character balance, so it never even crossed our minds that one character could technically be better than others. And we certainly didn't know about things like frame data. We were busy trying to unlock the secret fight with Noob Saibot or seeing the fatalities for the 200th time. It was the same for me with the early Capcom fighters. I played the hell out of Marvel superheroes. I beat the story mode, I challenged everyone at the arcades, but I couldn't tell you a damn thing about how that game works. All I cared about was spamming Unibeam, Smart Bomb, Repulsor Blast, and getting enough energy for the Proton Cannon.
Proton Cannon!
I'm upset we never saw Iron Man use that super attack in the movies. I mean, we see something that resembles it in the background of Infinity War. Guardians 2 has something similar. How did Iron Man never get to use it? I'm so disappointed. Speaking of disappointment, Mortal Kombat 2 is forever tied to possibly the greatest disappointment of my life. Forgive me for derailing the conversation a bit, but I gotta tell you about the Interactor. A $100 peripheral that promised to let you feel the action of the games you played, capitalizing on the silly virtual reality hype of the mid-90s. They actually marketed this specifically around Mortal Kombat 2.
Enter the virtual reality world of the Interactor, where all the action jumps off the screen and into your gut.
Hey, door! Plug it back in.
The Interactor. Put it on, plug it in, crank it up, feel it all.
Dude, let's plug it into the stereo.
Available at Toys R Us.
For my birthday that year, all I wanted was the Interactor. My young, naive mind was fantasizing about how I would feel like I was in the game, having dreams at night about cables going up my nose and into my brain so I could sense every detail of the fatalities. The future is now! Once I had it strapped to my back, the sound blasting through the speaker, the first thing I did was go to MK2 multiplayer and perform Reptile's headbite fatality on myself. Surely it would blow me away. And then all that happened was a short brrrr, and it was over. The illusion crumbled. I stood there in shock. It was just a crappy piece of plastic that vibrated to sound. This thing was a piece of shit. We took it back to Toys R Us, got store credit, and bought Streets of Rage 3, which was a far more entertaining experience. Anyway, the lead up to Mortal Kombat 3 had me running around the room in circles. I was so excited. A playable female Goro, Sub-Zero without a mask, robot characters, the return of Sonya and Kano, and the magazines were talking about the addition of a mysterious new button. Now, you having just heard about my vivid childhood imagination, thinking that a vibrating plastic box called the Interactor was actually going to hook wires up to my brain, that'll help you understand why I also blew this way out of proportion as well. We all know the new button was the run button, but I thought it was going to be a fatality button. I imagined they were going to add so many fatalities that there wouldn't be enough commands for them. It would be a 6-way split button, each piece of the button corresponding to a different class of fatality for each character, and then different motions combined with each piece of the button would perform a variation inside of each class of fatality. Absolutely ridiculous, I know, but I was a kid with a crazy imagination. I get really excited about stuff and I start speculating wildly, I'm sorry. MK3's introduction of the run mechanic, and now the integral part of Mortal Kombat gameplay, the dial-a-combo system, made me start paying attention to how the game worked a little more. Not a lot, I was still spamming a lot of specials, but now I was learning all these dialed-in combos, which helped my coordination a bit. My favorite characters to play were Cabal, Sindel, and Robot Smoke. And would you believe it, I never played much of Ultimate MK3, even though that's the far superior version. It brought back Scorpion and Katana and Reptile, we saw Ermac and Rain for the first time, more stages. It's considered the high point for the early era of Mortal Kombat. But I just had the regular MK3 on Sega Genesis and never got Ultimate. I only dabbled in it at the arcade. I kinda missed out. Around this time, we started seeing the introduction of the first 3D consoles, the Sega Saturn, the PlayStation, and the N64, bringing 3D polygon graphics to the home when they had been exclusively a thing of the arcades in the years preceding. I remember seeing the first Virtua Fighter and being so impressed with being able to fight in a three-dimensional space. It didn't matter how ugly the character models were. This was clearly the future of fighting games, and for Mortal Kombat, there would be no exception. MK4 would be the first game to ditch the 2D sprites of digitized actors against painted backgrounds, and instead go with 3D models in 3D spaces. This did cause the series to lose a bit of its charm to me, but I was also really excited about the technology. I read articles about how each character was made up of 700 or 9,000 or however many polygons it was, and being like, "Mom, Dad, isn't that cool?" I marched into the arcades to play MK4 in 1997, and I was not ready for what awaited me. No, it wasn't the graphics or the gameplay that surprised me, not the addition of weapons. It was this guy, Quan Chi. Nobody knew who he was unless they played that terrible Sub-Zero adventure game on consoles, and I did not. I just saw this scary bald guy plastered on the cabinet, thinking, who the hell is this guy? MK2's cabinet had the very recognizable Raiden on it. MK3's cabinet had the famous Shao Kahn from MK2. And now we've got this random bald dude staring at us? Who is this guy? Well, it didn't take me long to get to know him, and to fall in love. The moment I saw Shinnok's crooked collaborator tear off someone's leg, beat them to death with it, and not stop until the player pressed a button to continue, I knew we were destined to be together. He was a behind-the-scenes manipulator, making you think he's on your side until he gets what he wants. I thought it was compelling to see the best villain of the story not be the main villain you fight at the end, and one that you could actually play as. He's still my favorite character. MK4 was the last MK I would play regularly for many years. I got the console port for PlayStation 1, and I recorded all the fatalities on VHS so I could rewatch them whenever I wanted. That's a Mortal Kombat fan right there. In the late 90s, as the arcade scene completely died, Mortal Kombat faded away. The glory days of the 80s to mid-90s had died with the popularization of home consoles, and there just wasn't enough money to be found in making another MK for the arcades. In the following years, my gaming time was filled with Resident Evil, Twisted Metal, Silent Hill, Metal Gear Solid, StarCraft, Quake 2, and Unreal Tournament. I had plenty of violent and dark video games to satisfy. And maybe that's why the announcement of MK5, Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, largely fell flat for me. Mortal Kombat was an arcade game first and foremost to me, so I wasn't happy with it being a console exclusive. I was, for the most part, uninterested in the cast of new characters, and I thought the addition of multiple fighting styles per character was needlessly complicating things. I played it a bit at my best friend's house, the friend I'd played all the Mortal Kombats with, and I found it awkward and unexciting. Quan Chi's fatality was a total joke, the story didn't interest me, it just wasn't for me. But I did try to get into it. I went out and bought a copy for the PS2 and I tried to learn Scorpion. I played it for a few days, but I wasn't feeling it. I also really didn't like how long the combo juggles were, that you could get hit by these incredibly long combos that take half your life. It was not the MK experience I remembered from past games. Yes, I know, the older games had incredibly damaging combos that the pros can use to basically kill you in one go. It was so bad that MK4 had to implement a maximum damage mechanic that ended your combo for you. But those old MK2 and really MK3 combos were made possible by really creative players finding exploits and mastering very specific movement to do things largely unimagined by the developers. Deadly Alliance, to me, felt like the first time the devs were actually encouraging these extended combo juggles to everyone who played, making it a mainstream aspect of gameplay. It just rubbed me the wrong way. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, hell, I play modern Mortal Kombat and there's long combos in that too, but I wished there was some way to get out of so much damage. So imagine my delight when I saw the next MK, Mortal Kombat Deception, introducing the Combo Breaker system. I had put down Deadly Alliance early, actually taking it back for a refund, but now I was hyped for Deception. Why? Yes, the Combo Breaker system made me feel better about the combo-centric gameplay, but it was the characters. Cabal, Baraka, Ermac, Sindel, Tanya, a tag team of Noob Saibot and Smoke, and the introduction of Havoc, who twists and tears his body in brutal fashion. There was a new stage transition mechanic that was super impressive back in 2004, and when this game came out, my friends and I celebrated it. We got it day one and played for months. I even had a Baraka controller, which I broke in an embarrassing moment of gamer rage during an incredibly stressful match of Marvel Nemesis. But that's a story for another day. I got into the story of Deception. I played all the way through Conquest mode, talking to all the characters, unlocking every secret. I learned how to play with essentially the entire cast. My group of friends took turns challenging each other in chess combat, building our most broken teams, and we spent an insane amount of time in puzzle combat, which I hope comes back someday. My time playing Deception is up there with the early memories of MK2. And you would think that maybe from here I'd be back into MK fully, but I wasn't. The release of Mortal Kombat Armageddon passed me by completely, because while I was becoming a more formidable opponent, typically being the one to beat in my friend group, I was still a casual Mortal Kombat fan at the end of the day. And despite Armageddon having a roster of every single character to ever appear in a Mortal Kombat game up to that point, the lack of dedicated fatalities was an immediate deal breaker. They had so many characters that they couldn't fit all those fatalities onto the disc. Maybe it was just a lack of resources to animate all of them, I don't know. Whatever the reason was, I was out. Not interested. And then Mortal Kombat vs. DC in 2008, just no. First of all, I'm not a DC fan. Calm down, I'm not saying I hate DC, it's just I don't really care about it. I am more of a Marvel guy, but really I'm an X-Men fan above all else. Never cared much for Batman or Superman, though I do like some of the movies. And most of the DC characters I hadn't even heard of until recent years. Sorry DC fans, I'm way more interested in Colossus and Psylocke than I am in Green Lantern and Shazam. Just too much of the game put me off. The stage transitions, having these long drawn-out button-pressing sequences was a big no thank you to me. And I don't know, something about the way the game looks, it just doesn't do it for me. It's also rated T for teen in the US, so the fatalities are wimpy as hell, and the DC heroes don't get fatalities at all. They get heroic brutalities that are not fatal. I get how you can defend this, since these heroes should not be brutally murdering people, but come on, it's Mortal Kombat. Jax shouldn't be ripping his own daughter's face open either, and it still happens. Who cares? MKDC was a hard pass for me. That makes 2 MK titles that I completely sat out. I didn't care much anymore. Fast forward to 2011, and I'm living in a new city, working for a new company, and struggling a bit to make solid connections to form real friendships. I'm playing a lot of Black Ops 1 Zombies online because, hell, people play Call of Duty these days, so I guess I'll do that too. It was fine. Then the trailer for Mortal Kombat 9 came out, just called Mortal Kombat, a reboot of the series, returning to true two-dimensional gameplay, a new brutal X-ray super move, featuring all the classic characters of my childhood, retelling the story of MK1, 2, and 3. It was a gift from the heavens. I played the demo and it just felt so good. It had depth, but it also had a fun and easy arcade style to it where anyone could just pick up and play. Very accessible and very fun. I got it day one and everything about it just felt right. I plowed through the story mode in a day and played casually with my roommates. Due to the Sony hack of April 2011, there was no online play for me. Not that online MK9 was any good in the first place, but I was craving for those old days of playing with my close friends. One day, a roommate told me that she had some friends that played and she invited them over. I was playing Cabal and Ermac, they played Kung Lao and Raiden. We were total scrubs, but we had okay fundamentals and could do combos. We just really lacked in knowledge. These guys were brothers and they were students, so in their free time we hung out and played, sometimes daily. Soon after, we discovered the online community and the existence of tournaments. It's weird, the competitive and professional side of gaming is well known to people today, but even just 10 years ago, if you mentioned competitive gaming to your average person, they wouldn't know what you were talking about. And I was like that. Even though I'd been playing games my whole life and enjoyed playing Mortal Kombat against my friends for almost 20 years, it never even crossed my mind that there could actually be huge in-person events where people compete formally. It blew our minds. We started watching every MK tournament together, watching and learning, following our favorite players, tuning into the early podcasts with Tom Brady, no, not the football player, the MK player, and listening to the breakdowns of each character and what makes them work. It was fascinating to learn about frame data and the concept of footsies, zoning, rushdown, all these new terms. And it definitely wasn't just us having this experience. Mortal Kombat 9 was the entry point for a lot of people playing seriously for the first time. We were a community in its infancy, whereas other games like Tekken or Street Fighter had been well formed for years. This was the first Mortal Kombat to be made with the competitive scene in mind, so a community had to improvise and grow up fast. My new friends and I watched our first EVO together, screaming wildly during every MK9 match. We saw the rise of VSM in New York and the Dominican brothers, causing everyone to start leveling up fast with their high level of play. We started competing in local and regional tournaments. We met more people in our city and started hanging out, practicing several days a week. For a couple years, I reached out and met players in other cities, traveled, taking my crappy Quan Chi as far as he could go. I was never great at MK9, I was okay. In my group I was good, but I have slow reactions, I'm prone to bad decision making. What I'm good at is analyzing a character and solving problems on paper. Literally, I had 3 notebooks full of all the different ideas I had for character strategy, crazy measurements on how to generate meter the most effectively. My first appearance in the community was my measurements of the exact percentage of meter generated by different special attacks, and my discovery of whiffing special attacks during Quan Chi's trance to build extra meter for free, which became the standard for every Quan Chi player after. And soon after that, I decided to make video guides. So I made my first video, a guide to Quan Chi, covering his normals, mix-ups, specials, combos, setups, and the infamous rune trap where he could take about 45% of your health on block. It was a hit video, and a bunch of new Quan Chi players showed up online to annoy the hell out of everyone. Good times. I continued making strategy guides for the next year or so, but those videos are sadly no longer available because the background music I was using got flagged by YouTube about 4 or 5 years ago, so I took them down. They'll live forever in the memories of the people who put them on as background noise when they went to sleep. Shoutouts to the fans of my Science of Sector video. MK9 was essentially my life for 2 years. It was my friendships, it was my hobby, it was my obsession day to day. In the lead up to Injustice in 2013, my friends and I were excited, but also growing apart. People were getting into other kinds of games, the balance issues and glitches of MK9 were starting to become a problem, and then a nasty argument amongst us led to the dissolution of our group completely. Without the group, Injustice was impossible for me to commit to, on top of just not liking the game that much, despite how fun I thought Catwoman was to play. Just having one friend to play with wasn't getting me where I wanted to be. So after half a year of Injustice, I retired to become just a spectator, which I thoroughly enjoyed. The Injustice community was really fun to follow. The story of Injustice as a tournament game was fascinating, and full of amazing stories like 16-Bits rampaging as Catwoman, the rise of Sonic Fox, and so much more. I watched the GGA weekly local tournament stream from Chicago every single week. I miss it. Once it was time for the next Mortal Kombat to roll out, MKX, I was incredibly excited. New generation of consoles, dark menacing tone, the return of Shinnok from Mortal Kombat 4, and my boy Quan Chi was being featured right up front. It looked great. There were some concerns. We saw the stage interactables from Injustice make their way into Mortal Kombat, and like Injustice, it was becoming more 50-50 focused. But when the game came out, it was a lot of fun. The 50-50s and armored moves made MKX a bit too ridiculous for me, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't really enjoy playing Sorcerer Quan Chi and the new character D'Vorah. I tried to get into the tournament scene, I made a few video guides like I used to, but again, I just didn't have the local support. I'm not a big online player. I like in-person social interaction. I need a team if I'm gonna play for real. When MKX came out, I had a big group of friends over to my place. I invited players from other fighting game scenes in my city. We had a great time. It just didn't last. Within a few weeks, there was no one to play with but 1 or 2 friends. And they didn't take the game as seriously as I did. I was learning frame data, matchup knowledge, filling my notebook with all kinds of strategies, and watching tournaments. Meanwhile, they were content to keep doing the same week 1 combos months later. So not only was I not having fun fighting them anymore, I wasn't getting the experience I needed to do well competitively. MKX lasted about as long as Injustice for me, about half a year, until I realized I had no one to play with and I just let it go. I watched the tournaments, but I stayed away from the community. I didn't have anything to contribute anymore. At this point, I was pretty much done with playing fighting games competitively. I tried my hand at Street Fighter V, but not only is it simply not my kind of game, and a game I'm no good at, the only character I enjoyed playing was Fong, and he's so miserably bad that my attempts at playing in local tournaments resulted in utter humiliation. In 2017, Injustice 2 came out, and I couldn't have cared less. I didn't buy it, I just watched tournaments here and there. Basically, from my exit of MKX in 2015 all the way to 2019, I didn't even consider myself a fighting game player anymore. I watched every EVO, whether it was for Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter or Marvel. I love fighting games, so I watched them as a fan, but there wasn't anything for me to do. A similar story happened in MK11 in 2019. Just like MKX, I got all excited, the game came out and I had a big party and I said I was gonna take it seriously again. This time it actually seemed promising because several friends from other fighting games were getting into it and wanted to learn. And I got introduced to some people in my city that had been playing since MKX and I just never knew about them. We had a little crew going for a while. There were some guys that seriously challenged me. They were definitely better than me, though I was using Devora and they were using Liu Kang and Cassie Cage. So I more or less settled into a leadership role. I would sit with the new players on our team and teach them the basics, help them understand matchups, etc. I competed along with everyone else, always doing well but never winning, and I was proud of everyone around me getting better. I dove deep into Devora, her really being the only character that I enjoyed playing, and I started making strategy guides on my YouTube channel like before. Playing online, talking to the Devora community, things were great for a while. But really, the same thing happened again. Most of my friends stopped trying to learn new things after that initial 3-month burst. They didn't follow any top-level players using their characters, so they didn't experiment with any new strategies, and the whole team just stagnated. People eventually went back to their main games, which at the time was mostly Dragon Ball, and the others mostly stuck to online. Again, after about 6 months, it was over. Not just because the team hadn't gone in the direction I wanted it to, but also because I decided by that point I didn't really like playing MK11. Like Injustice, I find it to be a game where even when I'm winning, I'm irritated. The game frustrates me to no end even when I'm doing well, and that's because of how much I disagree with the general mechanics. I've made an entire video about that, going into fatal blows, the meter burn system, flawless block, variations, etc. And I made another video recently about how the new MK1 has either completely taken out the stuff I didn't like about MK11, or at least changed it in a way to make it not as irritating. I don't think MK11 is a bad game, and I actually learned a lot as a fighting game player by playing it and watching it, and MK11 Devora is one of the most fun characters I have ever played. But much like Catwoman in Injustice, she was a fun character in a game that I ultimately didn't find fun. I became a spectator, again, mostly watching the online tournaments hosted by Mr. Aquaman running MKX, MK11, and Injustice 2. That man does great work. Now it's 2023, or it was 2023 when I made this video. I'm currently waiting for the release of MK1, a game I didn't want to be excited for, but god damn it I am. Seeing the changes back to mostly classic mechanics, the toning down of aspects from MK11 and Injustice, the return of dash block movement from MK9, and the roster. I've been waiting 17 years to see Havoc return. I screamed like a child when I saw him in the trailer. I'm super hyped to see the return of Li Mei. Quan Chi is coming back. I think the cameo system and air combat are fresh ideas for the series, and I can't wait to see what kinds of dirty, broken shit people come up with. I'm excited, and suddenly I'm back in the Mortal Kombat community, sort of. My video on the issues I have with MK11 actually did really well, and I got a positive response from a lot of serious players who reached out to me. I was invited on the Realm cast to talk about the changes to Mortal Kombat's mechanics, and just as an anecdote, a couple weeks ago I was downtown at a music event and someone actually stopped me and said, "Aren't you under the mayo?" Now that's something that never happens, but he remembered me from a local Mortal Kombat competition years ago. So yeah, I'm back? Maybe? I don't know. It's way too early for me to say that I'm in this for the long term. Given my history of struggling to find teammates and quitting after 6 months, it would be disingenuous to promise that I'm about to deliver 2 years worth of Doom Eternal level content for Mortal Kombat. Hell, I may not even like the game, who knows? But unlike MK11, I am truly interested in learning several members of the cast already, and that's a good start. I can guarantee at least a review and some kind of basic character breakdown. I'm in a different position now than I was in 2019. I have this channel, I have a stronger connection to talented players around the world, I have a community of viewers that are interested in playing. I feel like I have what I need to go the distance if I feel the drive to do so. We'll see. Mortal Kombat has been with me for my entire life. It goes back further than Resident Evil, further than Doom, and I'll always follow it regardless of where it goes. Thank you for listening to what is basically my life story. I hope it wasn't too boring. I didn't know where I was going to take this when I started, and it kinda got out of control. Scripts like this are really fun to write because they require no research. They just come straight from the heart, and I can type it all out in one night. Please remember to like and subscribe. If you're new to this channel, I recommend you check out my videos on Resident Evil and Silent Hill. I talk about a lot of stuff here. Keep in mind I'm gonna say plenty you'll disagree with, but I hope you'll find something you enjoy here. Until next time, Mayo out.